a man who for some was a symbol of the Kurdish struggle for freedom, and for others, a ruthless terrorist responsible for the deaths of thousands. A story that began in the mountains of Kurdistan, became entangled in Damascus, and ultimately reached its end in Kenya during a complex espionage operation with the help of the intelligence services MIT, Mossad, and the CIA. Hello, I'm Elisa Farok, also a Persian singer, and in this video we want to talk about Abdullah Öcalan, the leader of the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Öcalan is one of the most controversial figures in the Middle East. He was highly educated at different times and in different countries. After years of ordering his people to lay down their weapons, his name is back on the agenda, and a lot is said about Abdullah. Let's start from the beginning. Abdullah Öcalan was born in 1948 in the village of Öcalan, Turkey. A village boy who, in the 1970s, tied his dreams to armed struggle by founding the PKK in 1978. His goal was an independent Kurdistan based on Marxist-Leninist ideology. But this was just the beginning of the story. Marxist-Leninist. In 1979, after the military coup in Turkey, Öcalan fled the country and took refuge in Syria. This is where things really got serious. For about 20 years, until the fall of 1998, Öcalan used Damascus as the center of his operations. During this period, the PKK transformed from a small group into a powerful armed force that challenged the Turkish government. Öcalan had set up his training camps in Lebanon's Bekaa Valley, which was under Syrian control. With the help of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, he trained Kurdish fighters and directed bloody operations from Damascus. Attacks like those we saw in Sirte, Hakkari, and Shemdinli had their roots in these very bases. Abdullah Öcalan used to hold strategic meetings in his private villa in Damascus and relay orders to field commanders. A famous Friday from Öcalan still lingers in my mind. He said, "Even a chicken that doesn't vote for the DAP will be slaughtered." The DAP was a party close to the PKK, and this showed that Öcalan was willing to do anything to advance his goals. In the 1980s and 1990s, the PKK attacked villages in Turkish Kurdistan. People were forced to cooperate under pressure and at gunpoint, and hundreds, including children and civilians, became victims. This is where the label child killer became attached to Öcalan. Although his supporters considered him a hero of freedom, Abdullah Öcalan probably has his own dedicated supporters who might even comment under this video and say, "No, he was a real freedom fighter, and these are lies that the Turks are probably spreading." Honestly, it's not possible for me to verify the extent of Abdullah Öcalan's crimes through a neutral channel, but most countries, including Western countries, consider Abdullah Öcalan and the PKK group to be terrorist organizations, because of the incidents that have happened or the operations they have carried out, and this shows that Abdullah Öcalan may not be as innocent as some of his supporters believe. Now, it's possible that the extent of the crimes attributed to Abdullah Öcalan has been exaggerated by the Turks, but for now, I will try to present, as impartially as possible, only the things that have been proven and reported in reputable media. But why Syria? Why did Hafez al-Assad, the then dictator of Syria, support Öcalan? The answer lies in regional politics. Assad saw the PKK as a bargaining chip against Turkey. For years, Turkey and Syria had disputes over the waters of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and the Hatay region. Hafez al-Assad gave Öcalan asylum, provided him with resources and security, and turned a blind eye to the camps. He even provided the PKK with logistical support through his intelligence agency. Arab sources like Al-Majalla say Assad did this to indirectly threaten his enemies, and the PKK was perfect for this purpose. Assad even said in a 1986 speech that Syria supports liberation movements, not terrorists. For him, Öcalan was just a pawn in the game of power balance, but this relationship was not permanent. In the fall of 1998, Turkey finally lost its patience and threatened Syria with military action. That was when Hafez Assad backed down and asked Öcalan to leave Syria. October 9, 1998, Damascus. Hafez al-Assad, under heavy pressure from Turkey, gave in. Turkish General Attila Ateş drew a line at the Syrian border and declared that by sheltering these bandits, they were contaminating Turkey with terrorism. Mr. Süleyman Demirel, the then president of Turkey, also said that our patience has run out, linking the threat to an American and Israeli conspiracy. He had no choice but to expel Öcalan, and from this point on, an adventurous journey began for this terrorist. Geopolitically, Turkey is in conflict with various countries. One of them was Syria, and another of the most important countries hostile to Turkey was Greece. That's why the Greeks played a significant role in saving Öcalan. It is said that Öcalan's first destination was Athens, Greece, but he was not allowed to land in Greek airspace and was forced to go to Russia. Of course, I believe that behind the scenes, the Greeks were trying to find a permanent place for Öcalan while paying the least possible political cost. Because if the Greeks had officially granted him asylum, it would have further strained relations between Greece and Turkey and could have even increased the risk of war. Öcalan goes to Russia. Moscow initially accepts his asylum request, but diplomatic pressure from Turkey and the West forces the Russians to deport Öcalan. His next destination was Italy. Abdullah Öcalan is arrested in Italy for having a fake passport. One of the ways the Greeks tried to throw off Öcalan's trail was by moving him to several different countries under a false identity, and ultimately making him disappear. And after he disappeared, they could settle him anywhere they wanted. That's why in Russia, they made a fake passport for him and with the help of that passport, transferred him to Italy. But surprisingly, or perhaps with the help of the Mossad, CIA, and Turkish MIT intelligence services, Abdullah Öcalan was exposed in Italy and his fake passport got him into trouble. Now, the Italians arrest Abdullah Öcalan and something similar to what happened to Muhammad Abedini happens to him. That is, the Turks put intense pressure on the Italians to extradite Abdullah Öcalan to Turkey so that his trial could be held there. But since Turkish law at that time sentenced terrorists to death, the Italians did not want to hand Öcalan over to the Turks because they knew that if he went to Turkey, he would definitely be executed within a few days or months. Because of these human rights laws, Italy ultimately did not hand Abdullah Öcalan over to Turkey. However, the people of Turkey put pressure for this to happen by organizing boycott campaigns and protests in front of the Italian embassy. In the end, as has happened many times before in Italy, an international criminal who was under house arrest escapes and disappears. On January 16, 1999, Öcalan returns to Russia. After some time, he goes to Greece and from there is sent to the Greek embassy in Nairobi, Kenya. Öcalan thought he had managed to escape from the MIT, Turkish intelligence service, but he didn't know that he had fallen into a big trap. The Greeks, who thought they were very clever, had devised a complicated plan. By transferring Abdullah Öcalan to several countries and then to Kenya, they were trying to make the political cost of this incident fall on Kenya. But in Kenya, he was supposed to be stationed at the Greek embassy so that Öcalan wouldn't actually be on Greek soil, yet at the same time, he would be protected as if he were. But the Greeks hadn't thought of one thing, as luck would have it for Abdullah Öcalan. At that time, several terrorist incidents had occurred in Kenya, and a number of American citizens had been injured or killed. Because of this, the CIA and Mossad intelligence services were extremely active there and were monitoring every event closely. They realized that a suspicious individual had arrived in Nairobi and was staying at the Greek embassy. After investigating further, they discovered that this individual was Abdullah Öcalan, and from that point on, as the intelligence officials say, they set up the operation for him. Let's take a moment to imagine this scene together. Abdullah Öcalan is currently hiding in the Greek embassy in Nairobi. The Turkish intelligence service, known as MIT, with the help of the CIA, has tracked him down. But the big question arises. Was Mossad, the Israeli intelligence agency, also involved in this affair? Turkey and Israel were close allies in the 1990s. They had signed a military agreement in 1996 and were cooperating against common enemies like Syria. Öcalan, who was in Damascus, a city allied with Iran and Hezbollah, was considered a threat by both the Turks and the Israelis. The PKK was also an anti-Israeli group that cooperated with the Palestinians. So, weakening Öcalan could have been in Israel's interest. Western sources like the New York Times speculated that Mossad might have monitored Öcalan's movements in Damascus and passed the information to Turkey. Although the Israelis officially denied this, the rumors grew stronger when the Kurds attacked the Israeli consulate in Berlin. Whatever the case, Öcalan was not alone in Nairobi. The CIA, MIT, and perhaps Mossad all had their eyes on him. He thought the Greeks were going to transfer him to the Netherlands in a complex espionage operation. But what he never expected was a breathtaking abduction operation. The Greeks, through the embassy, had told Abdullah Öcalan that they were going to send a special Dutch plane for him and that he would be secretly transferred from Kenya to the Netherlands. And Abdullah Öcalan was waiting every day for this plane to arrive so that he could be transferred to the Netherlands under a strange identity. He might have thought to himself that this was the last journey that would lead to his freedom, and after that, with his new identity, he could remain hidden from the Turks for years. But on the other side, the Americans and probably Mossad were monitoring all of Öcalan's conversations with the Greeks. And they had realized that a plane with specific characteristics was supposed to come to Kenya and transfer him to the Netherlands. That's why the Turks acted first and prepared a plane with exactly the same specifications and even the same colors. And under the cover of banana trade, they sent that plane to Nairobi, February 15, 1999. Nairobi, Kenya. Now Mitt had fulfilled his role. A private plane that was painted to look like the Greek plane. MIT agents were waiting inside the plane, but the pilots had no knowledge of the operation. The passenger information used the identities of two banana traders so that the Kenyan security services wouldn't catch on to what was happening. Now Öcalan had been informed that his plane was ready and that he needed to get to the plane quickly. By the Kenyan intelligence services side, Öcalan was told that his plane was ready and that he should pack his things and head to the plane with one of their agents. A Kenyan military jeep stops in front of the Greek embassy, and Abdullah Öcalan, along with his interpreter, gets into the jeep. His interpreter says that Abdullah had sensed something and was extremely worried, but he had no choice but to trust them. The jeep sets off and heads toward the airport. Meanwhile, the Kenyan security services realize what is happening and the Kenyan police quickly try to block the road. The Kenyan driver, who understands what's going on, takes a detour and manages to get Öcalan to the airport. With the help of CIA agents, Abdullah Öcalan quickly passes through the airport gate and boards the plane. As soon as he enters the plane, MIT agents handcuff him and put a hood over his head. The first sentence Öcalan hears after this happens is, "Abdullah Öcalan, welcome to your country." The plane heads toward Turkey. After a brief stop at Ataturk Airport for refueling at 3 a.m. on February 16th, the plane lands at a Turkish military base. That same day, Turkish officials announce in the news that Abdullah Öcalan is in Turkey and quickly begin his trial. On May 31st, 1999, a special court is convened, and after the 9th session, Öcalan is sentenced to death. Since the Turks wanted to join the European Union, they were forced to amend some of their laws. And by abolishing the death penalty, Abdullah Öcalan's sentence was commuted to life imprisonment in 2002. From that day until now, Mr. Öcalan has been in one of the most secure prisons in Turkey, but the Kurds still consider him their leader. The story of Abdullah Öcalan's abduction definitely has many more details, and there were certainly people involved in this operation whose names have never been mentioned anywhere. But I tried to gather as much information as I could for you from various media and sources and prepare this video. The story of this abduction is also very similar to the story of Jamshid Sharmad's abduction. For those who don't know, Jamshid Sharmad was supposed to travel from Dubai to Pakistan. And through a complex intelligence and espionage operation, agents from the Ministry of Intelligence managed to transfer him into Iran. After he arrived, he realized that he was in Sistan and Baluchistan, not Pakistan, and he was immediately arrested. Besides Mr. Jamshid, we also had Riji, who was said to have been brought to Iran in a similarly complex operation. Of course, we don't know the exact details of that operation, but whenever I get more information about it, I will definitely make a video about it. It's true that Abdullah Öcalan was arrested and sentenced to life imprisonment in Turkey, but he still has an influence over the Kurds. Even now, he has issued a statement asking all PKK Kurds to lay down their arms and put an end to guerrilla warfare. If this actually happens, it would be a major transformation in the region and could change the situation in various countries. It's something that's a bit hard to accept in the Middle East, and it's difficult to believe that terrorist groups like the PKK would lay down their arms so easily. But what do you think? Do you think the PKK will really surrender, or will they continue their fight? I read all your comments and will respond to as many as I can. Until the next video, goodbye.